Hello everyone, and in this video we will see how to program this radio HA1G with the cable that Retevis has sent me. We will look at the programming of the radio for the channels and also how to upgrade the firmware on the radio to its latest version. So first we are going to navigate to the Retevis website and find the Ailunce HA1G radio. In this page you will find the support button here on the top right corner. We're gonna click on that, and that will take us directly to the two software or the two downloads that we have for this radio. The number one is the programming software for, or CPS software, that is to set up the channels and the settings in your radio. The number two download that we have in here is the firmware, the latest firmware for the radio, that it will provide you two main features. One of them is to fix the color display. Let me go back here to the top to show the original firmware comes with this black font on top of blue background, which is very hard to read in normal conditions and is even harder to read outside. So this is the original firmware, and with the updated one, you will see that when I show on the radio, it looks much nicer because the fonts are changed to white. So we will see if there are other things, but that is the main change. And the other one is you can unlock now the radio to fully transmit in the ham bands if you have the license to do that. So let's proceed downloading those two pieces of software. So this is the first one, the CPS, and I download that. Let me download the firmware, and they are very small files, so this download very quickly. And now we are going to unzip these two applications, and we'll continue from there. So now I have unzipped those two downloads in these two folders here. So let's start investigating first the firmware upgrade or update. Let me open that folder. There is a Word document in here that contains the change log. So let me open that, and let me show you very quickly what I was mentioning earlier. This is now the improved font color. On the blue background is now white. This is one of the improvements, and like I mentioned, there are a couple more improvements. One is an improved receive and transmit a pop-up window when the radio is receiving or transmitting. You can see here it shows red when you're transmitting, and it shows if you're transmitting any codes, CTCSS or DCS tones. And the same when you're receiving. Also, another very nice feature is now you can make changes to the zones on the radio. You can add a zone, and also you can rename the zone and do all this kind of editing directly on the radio without the need of the CPS software. So now, before we do anything else, the first thing we need to do is to plug the cable into the computer, and to do that I have opened my device manager here on the screen. So once I plug the cable, I will see very quickly what is the COM port that it was assigned to this cable. So let me plug it into my computer. This is what I'm doing now, and this should refresh. And as you can see here, this is the last one. It has been identified as a USB serial CH340 COM17. So that is now the COM port. COM17 is the COM port that we'll use on the two software. So next we are going to connect the cable to the radio. So to do that, there is on the right side of the radio, there is this connector that is also for the speaker and the microphone. Here we remove this cover. You have to be cautious, don't lose here the cover. It has a gasket to protect the water to come in. We have to make sure when we remove this that they don't lose that gasket. The cable goes this way into the radio. There's a notch in here, and then we attach it with the screw. Firmly, we make sure it's firm into the radio, and we are ready to proceed with the next step. Now the radio is connected. We go back to the HA1G update tool.exe and we execute that. That opens this window, and as you can see here, I already have the COM port selected, the one that it detected earlier, the COM17. Upgrade automatically detects the firmware here, but you have to make sure that it's pointing to the right bin file, which it should be by default when you open the exe. So next you click the update button in here, and that it will give you this message that is waiting for the radio to enter in upgrade mode, right? And you have like 300 seconds to do that. Now we will switch to the radio, and I will show you how to turn the radio into upgrade mode. So the radio on the side, it has the PTT button and these two extra function buttons. And to put the radio in update mode, you have to press the PTT button and the first button, that function button that is close to the PTT, while you turn your radio on. Let me show the front of the radio when I'm doing that. First, the LED goes to green and then goes to red when it's connected to the computer to start upgrading. On the screen, it normally remains off when you are doing this process. In this moment, the firmware is pushed into the radio. Once the firmware upgrade completed, the radio will reboot itself and it will show the main screen. And now you can see here the fonts on the blue background are white, and the font on the white background for the second BFO is, or the second channel, is black over white. And the other feature that I was mentioning earlier, like if you want to use this for ham radio and you have the license to do so, you can put this radio able to unlock with pressing the lock button. Once the radio is in lock mode, let me see if I can put it here on the screen. Here there is a lock. So once the radio is in lock mode, you have to press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This put this red exclamation mark close to the battery icon, and now you can transmit in the ham band. So let me unlock the radio and switch to this frequency. So now for this second part of the video, we'll cover the CPS software, the programming of the radio. So we go to the folder in our computer where we unzipped the CPS software, and we execute the Retevis CPS.exe, which I have open here. And the next thing that we need to do is to read from the radio. So we have already the radio connected into the COM17 port, and we click OK. And now is reading the data from the radio. We're gonna wait for that. And now it's all done, and my current settings on the radio are now in this version of the CPS software. One thing I can do is I say File, Save. So I have a current copy of today. So I have two previous versions of this from before. So I save a new copy since I'm going to be making changes. And it's always good to read directly from the radio when you start, because if you made some changes manually on the radio, you don't want to lose them, right? When you upload the new version of the programming, you want to keep those manual changes that you've done on your radio. So I always start the programming of any radio reading directly from the radio itself. In the software, we have different sections. We have the basic settings, the emergency settings, the zones, the channels, and the scanning settings. So those are the typical settings that you will find in any CPS software. Those are the typical settings that you will find very similar of the DMR radios. So we will go section by section exploring what options we have. In the basic information, we have in here the software version of the radio, which is the latest firmware that we use to upgrade the radio, the model and so on, and the hardware version. In setting, we have configuration of the radio, your preferred weather channel, the backlight, and all things like that that you can set up. There's so many. I will not go one by one on all the options because this video will take forever. In the next section, you have the emergency settings. Then on the next one, you have your key settings. I want to stop for a moment in this one. This is important. These key settings are the two extra function buttons that are below the PTT. You can program them for a long press or short press, each key, including the PTT, or here they call it transmit key. You can override the functionality for long press or short press. In my case, I program my key number 1, the one that is closer to the PTT, for a long press to monitor the channel. The long press on the one below is to scan on that channel, start scanning on that channel. And short press for the key 1, I have set up that to increase the zone, and the short press for the one below to decrease the zone. So I can change the zone very simply by pressing those two function buttons without having to go to the menu and have to select the zone on the menu of the radio. Moving down the list, we have the zones. I have programmed different zones on this radio. You can see, if you go at the top level, all your zones and how many channels you have added to your zones. In my case, I have GMRS zones. 1 and 2 are these two zones. Then I have the ham radio repeaters. Services, I put in here typically the fire department, the police department, EMS. I have the two simplex channels in here for VHF and UHF, and then all the frequencies that are in VHF or UHF in my area. The next section, it has all the channels, starting first with the BFO-A and BFO-B when the radio is in VFO mode. Those are also set up as channels, and you can configure your starting configuration for those two. The next set of channels from the channel 3 to the channel 32 are all the GMRS channels, and you can see here this is grayed out because those are fixed channels. You cannot change the frequencies, but you can change any of the remaining settings that you see here on the table that are in white. Below that, I have my ham radio repeaters that I have programmed into this radio. After that, I have set up the IIS, police, fire department, the weather channel. You don't need to do that because the radio already has all the weather channels set up, but I put the one I use the most in here, APRS, and then all the RS frequencies for my region in VHF and UHF. The next section in the CPS are the scan settings. So I have 6 lists created, and each list is for a different zone, so matching each zone. The one thing that I want to point out here is each list you can have a priority channel 1 and 2. So what the radio does, if you have those set up to different channels, the radio will scan through this list of channels, but time to time it will also monitor the channel 1 and the channel 2 that you have set up here in this section, and that slows down your scan of these channels. So what I done in my case, I just keep them as none because I'm not interested in this functionality. So now let's take a look how we can create new channels, new zones, new scan settings very quickly. So I'm going to create a new zone, and to do that, if I go to the top level, and there is a plus sign in here, so I can create a new zone. You see automatically is named Zone 8. So next we are going to create a new channel. So for that we go to the channel section and we do the same thing. We click on the plus sign, and we have all the options for our new channel. So we're going to change the name, and we're going to call this test VHF, and we're going to change the frequency to 144.0, and same thing for the TX. So we're going to make it simplex, but you can set up repeaters or duplex, whatever you want. Tones, if you need, you can select whatever tone for receive and transmit. The one thing that is important is in what scan list it will trigger when you press the scan button on this channel. And in this case, you can select any of these ones to trigger, but we're going to create a new scan list for these two channels that we're going to create now to test, and then we're going to change the scan list to that. We're going to go back to this. So let's create one more channel for UHF, and we're going to call this test UHF. Test UHF. And we're going to leave it at this frequency just to make it simple. And then we have our test VHF and test UHF channels created in here. Now in the next step, we're going to create a scan setting for these two channels. So like always, we go to the top level and then click the plus sign. And we are going to name this scan list as test scan. And I'm going to remove the priority channels. I mentioned this earlier. If we need to do that, otherwise it will always scan these channels when it is scanning the other channels that we put on the list. And in our scan channel list, we are going to remove also this one, and we are going to add the two new channels that we just created. So we select the two channels and we add them in here. So we have them, we have two channels. So now we go back to our zone 8 and we'll add in here the two new channels that we created to test, these two. We'll add these two to our channel list, and we will remove this one that comes with the radio. And now we have our zone created. So we're gonna rename this. We're gonna call this test zone. So we will see all this later on the radio. So we have our test zone with the two test channels that we created, test VHF and test UHF. We have our two new channels here, test VHF and test UHF, and we have our test scan that we created. And in here we have the members that we're gonna add are the test VHF and test UHF, and we'll complete the configuration. So now our final step is to go back to these two channels, test VHF, and remember the scan list. We want to make the scan list for these two channels. So it's going to be the test scan for this one, and the same for the test UHF. We have to make it the test scan. So why we have to do that? So when we are in these two channels and we press the scan button, it will remain scanning these two channels. So I remove the emergency because I don't use emergency in any of these two channels. And now is all set up. Now we can save the file and we can push the file into the radio. So I added the camera with the radio, so you can see when I push this to the radio in the port COM17 in here, and I press OK, it's asking me if I want to write it to the radio. I'm gonna say yes, and you can see now the radio is getting the CPS right. Alright, so the programming has been completed. The radio reboots itself. So now let's take a closer look to the radio itself and see how all the changes that we done on the CPS software got reflected into the radio. So the first thing we're going to do is going to move the channels and see that we have here on the channel 74 and 75 our two test channels that we created. We're also gonna press the scan button in here. So now you can see the radio is scanning, but is scanning our test UHF and VHF channels that we created, but also is always scanning the secondary BFO that we have below here. To avoid that, you have to put the radio in single BFO. So to do that, we press the lock button, and now it's in single BFO. And now if we press scan again, we'll see that the radio is only scanning those two channels that we set up in the way that we set it up. We wanted only to to scan these channels. So we're gonna go out of this, and we're gonna go to the menu to see the rest of the changes that we done. We're gonna go zone. We can see on the zones that we have our test zone. We are going to the channels, and then we can see we have our two channels that we created, and we go to scan, and we'll see here that we also have our test scan list as we created in the CPS software. So those are all the changes that we done on the CPS, and they are all loaded into the radio. And with that, we'll conclude the explanation of the firmware upgrade and the CPS programming of the HA1G GMRS radio. And I hope you liked this video, and if you do so and you get this far, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until the next time.